Hey everyone, welcome back to Window Seat Studies. I hope you all are doing well. So today we are going to discuss about properties of cancer cells. In the last class, we discussed about malignant tumor versus the benign tumor. We also discussed about different types of cancers, the carcinoma, sarcoma, leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma, so on and so forth. Today we are going to discuss about the properties of cancer cell. Well, a normal cell, it loses its control over the division, differentiation, and apoptosis, how it gets converted into tumor, and how they display several abnormal properties. So, the very first property, which is quite important and distinct and belongs to the tumor cell, it is that they do not show contact inhibition. So, contact inhibition, this property is displayed by normal cells. So, what happens is that the normal cells, when they migrate, and they come into contact with other cells, the cell migration stops. So this is what we call as contact inhibition. So those normal cell adhere each other and form a uniform structure. Okay, and this property is known as this inhibition of growth after the contact is known as contact inhibition. While the tumor cells, the cancerous cells, they do not exhibit this property. So upon coming in the contact with the other cells, this cell continue moving, and they continue migrations over the adjacent cell, and they start growing on the adjacent cell, and this results into a disordered and multi-layered pattern. So the very first property of cancer cell is that they do not show contact inhibition, unlike the normal cells. The other property which is quite distinct and which defines the cancer cells is invasion and metastasis. So the cancer cells show invasiveness as well as the metastasis. Invasiveness means the ability of those cells to invade the neighboring tissue, while the metastasis means the ability of those cancer cells to migrate from one location to a new location and proliferate there and produce a secondary tumor. So invasiveness means they invade the other tissue, while metastasis means they go to a certain new location and they can form a secondary tumor. So both of these characteristics, they belong to the cancerous cell, and that make them very fatal for the patient. And those invasion and metastasis, it is possible because the tumor cells secrete certain proteases. Okay, and those proteases, they digest the extracellular matrix, and they allow the cancer cell to invade the adjacent normal tissue. Again, the second property of cancer cell, so let's say the first property is that which leads to the invasiveness, or which leads to the metastasis, is that they secrete, those cancerous cells secrete proteases, which is going to digest extracellular matrix. Okay, and that is how they can invade the tissue. While they can also, the second thing that they secrete is certain growth factors. Okay, so those cancer cell can secrete certain growth factors, which results into the formation of new blood vessels, which we refer as angiogenesis. So the secretion of the growth factors leads to the formation of blood vessels. Okay, so the secretion of growth factors leads to formation of blood vessels, which is known as angiogenesis. And why is the angiogenesis important for cancerous cell? Because okay, so now the tumor is formed, and tumor is uncontrollably growing, proliferating cell mass. So they need to ensure a constant supply of oxygen as well as nutrients, and that is ensured by formation of new blood vessels that will be providing the oxygen and the nutrients to the growing cells. Okay, and that is why for the angiogenesis is also important property that is exhibited by cancer cells. Cancer cell, they can survive beyond the Hayflick limit. So what is this Hayflick limit? So the normal cells, they have the limited capacity to grow and divide in both condition, in vivo or in vitro. Okay, so even if they have the optimal growth condition, or they have a lot of nutrients, a lot of oxygen, there is a limit to which how they can grow, and how generation they can divide. Like there are only they can only divide until the 40 to 60. So Hayflick limit is that normal cell, they can show only 40, okay, they can show 40 to 60 divisions. Okay, and this is what we call Hayflick limit. But this limit, this is not shown, this is not displayed by the cancerous cell. So we can say that they are kind of immortal cell, and they can divide and they do not age and die. Okay, so normal cell, they cease dividing after the 40 to 60 division, and they age and they die. But those cancerous cell, they do not do so. And why, what could be the reason? Okay, so normal cell, they have the end replication problem. So the DNA at the primer binding, it is not copied. So this results into the continuous shortening of telomeres each time the cell divide. Okay, and due to the telomere shortening, the cell eventually ages and die. But this problem is tackled in the cancerous cell, and that is why they can survive beyond the Hayflick limit. So we can say that cancerous cell, they are kind of immortal cells. Okay. So this property is also a quite distinguishing property of the tumor cells. Again, they exhibit the autocrine stimulation. So what happens is that when normal cell they grow, they need certain growth factors for proliferation. Okay, so in those normal human tissues, the growth factors, they are generally produced at some distant site, and then they are carried out through the bloodstream and they diffuse to the target cell, and that is how the signal is received from X location, and signal is received in the X location, and it is produced from the Y location. Okay, so, but this doesn't happen in the tumor cell. Tumor cell, they prefer producing their own growth factors, which can bind to the receptors which are present on the tumor cell itself. So it's like the signal is produced by the same cell, and that signal is activating the same cell. So that is what we call autocrine stimulation. So this is the tumor cell. It produces the growth factor. Okay, this tumor cell produces growth factor, and that growth factor works on the same cell. That is what we call autocrine stimulation. So they do not need any exogenous proliferative signal. So that is very important property, and so they secrete the growth factors, which leads to the angiogenesis as well as the autocrine stimulation. The next property of cancerous cell is that they show anchorage independent growth. So the unlike normal cells which exhibit anchorage dependent growth, means the normal cells, they need to there is a requirement for the growth that they must be attached to the rigid substratum. Okay, so they must be anchored in order to grow, but they cannot proliferate it when they are suspended in fluid or in semi-solid agar. But the cancerous cell, they are the transformed cells which can proliferate even when they are in the suspension or they are not attached to any substratum. So that is what we call as anchorage independent growth. So anchorage independent growth is exhibited by cancerous cell, unlike the normal cells. So normal cells have anchorage dependent growth. Okay, unlike the cancerous cells. So this is also a very significant property of cancer cells. And the last but not the least, which makes them immortal cell, is that they do not undergo apoptosis. The apoptosis is the programmed cell death. So it every cell, when it ages, it undergoes the apoptosis, but cancer cell do not exhibit this property, which makes them immortal cell. So this is it for today's video. We have discussed all of the properties of cancer cell in detail. In the next lecture, we will discuss about the molecular basis of cancer and the progression of cancer. Till then, see you. Bye-bye.